tomorrow. So we're going to make the best of it whilst we can. We were very keen to get on air this evening to sort things out. Obviously, things are very, very fast moving. They happened very quickly yesterday, so it's only right and proper that the Greyhound community, and we are a community, get the chance to hear exactly what is going on. And we can now, or I can now go to GBGB Managing Director Mark Bird. First of all, hello Mark. It must be a tumultuous time for everybody involved in wider society and greyhound racing, and particularly yourself.
Yeah, hi Jason, very much so. I mean, we all are facing this for the first time, and we all realised quite early on about how big a ask it's going to be of people to get through this. But as you said, we are a community and we will get through it. That's the bottom line.
Now, as I said, also things are very fast moving, and last night, of course, you made the decision to cease racing, but you also said that you needed some clarifications. You've obviously been in a meeting today, and you've got in touch with DEFRA and the DCMS, and you've had those clarifications. They were specifically on, if you like, the interpretation on gatherings and work.
That's correct. I mean, obviously the Prime Minister last night made his announcement to restrict movements further than they already had. And whilst we took the decision based on that to cease racing last night, obviously there was always with one eye on will Greyhound racing be exempt to all of this? And you're right, I had very early morning conversations with DCMS, most notably, around that interpretation. Yes, and for good reason, they maintain that people who need to get to kennels to look after their dogs in terms of care and welfare and feeding, etc., that can continue. That is a necessity. Because obviously we don't want welfare issues on our hands. But when it came to can we continue racing, the initial assessment on that is that no, it would constitute a gathering of more than two people. And I think there were issues that people were picking up on, things like the pick-up after racing, that people were coming together. So we've had to take that on the chin, and the Greyhound Board have met today as an emergency meeting to consider that. And until the government advice changes from that current position, we will have to stop racing for at least the next 3 weeks, constantly reviewing what's going to happen in and out of the government. I was told this afternoon from DEFRA that there will be some greyhound racing specific advice to come out. Whether or not that conflicts with what we've already been told, we'll have to wait and see. But for the time being, unfortunately, racing cannot go ahead for the next 3 weeks.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I've got your press statement from today. In it, you quite rightly and appropriately make the point that welfare is key, absolutely paramount. But obviously, you also recognise, and I might as well read verbatim a little bit here, that there is an economic impact on those working in the sport. You therefore will be releasing funds for greyhound and professional trainers to assist them in the coming weeks to provide food and bedding for their greyhounds. This will constitute 50p per day per dog for each trainer and will include puppies and retired greyhounds as well as current racers. The contingency eliminates in the short term any risk to trainers not being able to meet the basic welfare needs of the greyhounds due to loss of income.
Okay, that's quite right. I mean, 50p doesn't sound like a lot of money, I understand that, but you need to put that in the context that there are over 16,000 dogs that are effectively mostly tied to their kennels now, albeit they'll be exercised and they'll be taken out, but 16,000 dogs at 50p each per day will very quickly eat into our cash reserves. People need to remember that betting has stopped because racing stopped, and in fact betting was restricted as soon as they shut the LBOs, the licensed betting offices. So that means that there won't be money flooding into the Greyhound Board as there has in the past. So we are completely reliant on cash reserves, which is why I said earlier that when we looked at this and we were doing the planning, we would divert the money that we've saved over the last 2 years, which would have been spent on the Greyhound Retirement Scheme, which would have been spent in terms of trying to update trainers' kennels in line with the new regulations around that. That now has been earmarked for providing a contribution. We're not going to cover it on 50p, but giving a contribution to trainers to help them with the feeding and getting bedding for dogs. We need to remember that there is still a responsibility from owners here to also look after their dogs and certainly not to abandon them, which, again, going back to the fact that we are a greyhound community, I vehemently think that they won't do that given the circumstances. So that's what we've put into place. It will become effective from the 1st of April. and then people already are being contacted by the stipendiary stewards from Greyhound Board and also from the office staff, who obviously, as I said, are now remote working. But they will be speaking to trainers, finding out what dogs they've got in their care. And you're quite right, Jason, it's not just racing dogs, it's also retired dogs, and it's also puppies as well, because we want to cover those payments as best we can as well. So once we've got that detail to hand, the week, probably of the 1st of April, we can start to make those payments. It will be by bank credit. We're not going to be writing cheques, because that will mean that people need to go to banks to cash those. But it is a contribution. Over the next coming weeks and even months, we can sustain that. So again, people need to look at it not from a poultry point of view in terms of 50 pence. They need to scale that up to what it actually costs their dogs to be fed and kept. And again, they're not going to be going out buying premium racer. Again, they'll have to know that the dogs aren't going to be racing anytime soon, or certainly not in the next 3 weeks, and buy accordingly. And just on that note, we have been speaking to food producers, and I'm aware that in some distribution places, again, this panic buying is also related to dog food as well, and food's disappeared off the shelves. All of the suppliers are telling us that they will restock as soon as they can. But again, people need to take responsibility for how much food they're buying and stockpiling. And then finally on that note, again, when we've already been speaking to trainers, we have a rough idea about how much supplies they have in terms of food and bedding for dogs. And that ranges from everything from 1 week's worth through to several months. So that's the position. That's the decision of the board, is to try and support trainers as best we can. And that will be by payments from the 1st of April.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mark. Obviously, I think at least to some degree people have got to understand that with limited resources, if you can't perhaps eradicate the burden, you can certainly ease it. And one thing that also should be considered is that trainers come in many different moulds, don't they? They're in all shapes and sizes, and all their needs will be different from trainer to trainer. And the stipendiary stewards and office staff, I read here, are currently determining each individuals as far as they can in a matter of times individual needs.
Absolutely. I mean, we know that there are trainers out there who are relatively well off. There are also a lot of trainers out there who are very much hand to mouth. So it'll be very difficult to prioritise that. But our stipendiary stewards, you've got to remember, they have about 100 trainers each in terms of their regions. So they do know, most of them, very well, and they'll know what the situation is. So where we know that there are particular hardship issues, then we will try to prioritise those payments as best we can.
Also here, Mark, it says you'll continue to signpost trainers, veterinary surgeons and stadia owners who rely on income from our sport, and you're going to keep an eye on the government-assisted packages. You particularly mentioned packages for those that are self-employed. I believe the Chancellor is actually going to make a statement on that a little bit later today, so hopefully, at least in that instance, he'll be able to ease the burden a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we've been lobbying Parliament and government rather to try and get that put across into the package of financial measures that the Chancellor was talking about, because it doesn't just affect trainers. Probably 99% of all of our registered trainers are self-employed. But of course, we need to remember that track vets also fit into that category. And as a result of which, it's the right thing to do for the government to turn around and look at that. All we're saying to people who are self-employed within the sport at the moment is just make sure you're ready. Because again, any lag on being able to supply invoices, etc., will just result in a delay in being paid as and when that comes along. But we are hopeful that will happen.
It is inevitable, sadly, that some greyhounds will face, if you like, early retirement, and the need will be great there. And I see that you have been in contact with rehoming charity partners, in particular the Greyhound Trust.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke to the Greyhound Trust earlier today. They have some provision to take dogs in. That should be an emergency condition. So this isn't, again, a chance just for people to offload their dogs. We need to do that responsibly. But one of the things that I was surprised at, and we spoke about this as a board previously, was that in times of crisis, a lot of people, certainly the animal welfare charities, tend to have dogs dumped at their doors. And we're not talking about greyhounds, we're talking about all breeds, because people really do struggle to keep them when economically it's very difficult. But one of the most heartening stories I've heard so far was from the Greyhound Trust, saying that they've been inundated with lots of people who want to foster greyhounds. They accept they're going to be at home for a period of time, and actually, if they've had an inkling about getting a dog before, they are now approaching places like the Greyhound Trust, and one would hope other charities as well, to say, look, can we take on a greyhound, albeit in the short term? I'd love that to happen, because we all know that if they take it on the short term, the chances are they'll fall in love with the breed and they'll keep the dog. So there is, as I said, believe it or not, some inklings of hope in what we're talking about here today.
Absolutely, and you do recognise, again, referring to the statement, that your core responsibility at the GBGB is safeguarding the welfare of greyhounds. But you also point out quite correctly that that burden isn't completely on your shoulders. Stadia, trainers, owners, and the UK bookmaking industry can all play their part too.
We all have a part to play in it, and as I said, we're going well beyond what our brief has ever been. I said to the board today when we met, our mission really has become really focused into obviously trying to safeguard the welfare of the greyhounds, as you said, but that goes with the fact that the stripes aren't just collating numbers of dogs, they're also making sure that we've got a lot of ageing trainers out there as well, that they're also being, as best they can, catered for, even if it's just with referral to other departments. But yes, everyone has a part to play in this. The Greyhound board has stepped up to the plate, and I'd like other people to do the same.
Absolutely. Now, you are going to continue, obviously, your online presence and social media, but you've just mentioned actually a lot of the trainers are rather aged and may not be entirely comfortable with that. Can they still get in touch with you by traditional means? Would they still be able to phone the GBGB?
Well, again, we had to follow government advice ourselves as an employer, so we shut the London office as from today. But what we have done is, if someone dials the normal number, or they want to dial welfare or through to finances when we start getting into payments, those numbers will still divert to members of staff who are working from home. So it should, on the face of it, be business as usual in terms of being able to contact the Greyhound board.
Mark, thanks so much for talking to us. It's not a time for trite epithets, but we do sincerely thank you for getting or taking the time to talk to us, and hopefully ease some of the questions that have been preying on people over the last couple of days. You're right when you said, obviously, this is bigger than greyhound racing, but greyhound racing is the sport we all very, very much love, and we thank you for all your efforts for making sure that through these times of hardship, the best can be done for principally the dogs and all those involved. Would you like to give us a final message?
I've been saying this all the times I've been coming on RPGTV, that there is an outside to this. We will come out the other side. Yes, there could be some collateral damage in the meantime. Yes, there could be some people who will be leaving the sport. But I'm heartened by the way that everyone's reacted so far to this. And I'm pretty sure that we, along with everybody else, can get behind the fact that greyhound racing will emerge from out of this, and who knows, maybe even in a better place, because we have gone the extra distance to ensure that we kept racing when others couldn't. So, we have to look at the positive. We have to be optimistic about what will come out the other side. But in the meantime, as a community, going back to what you said right at the very beginning, we have to endure this, and endure it we will, Jason. So I'd like to thank you, the support we've had from RPGTV, but also from your viewers as well.
Yeah, and just from the response we've had over the last few weeks, we do know how much it has meant for people to see greyhound racing of an evening. Mark, you've had a terribly busy time of it. That's only continue. Thanks once more, and hopefully see you on the other side soon.
Thanks again.